Good morning, folks. Great to see you all. We've just had our slideshow there of the photographic challenge, all the images that has come in. It's been a very interesting few days getting them organized and seeing what has come in. Hope you've all learned from the last number of lectures that we've been giving and talks about our equipment and such like. Right then, so we've got all the images in, come in very well on the system. I would like to thank the people who entered, especially from Meetup. There's been entries in from Meetup, and hopefully you are joining us this morning, and maybe other Meetup people are joining us this morning for this wonderful live stream. We are trying to all learn this new technology, and this is all new for us, getting a competition or a little challenge like this to go. So it's been quite interesting. A couple of little things have gone wrong. We've corrected most of them. I've actually corrected some of them, and then for some unknown reasons the fairies have come and got me and redid it. Even though I changed it, the fairies still left it the way it was wrong. But that was, we'll eventually get through the whole system. Only small little things, not worth worrying about. Right, so folks, we got the entries in. You all sent them in perfectly. Great coming in through the system that we have into the Anoiga system. Works very well. A few little challenges to be sorted out, but overall working very, very well. So as all the images have come in, it's going to be a little bit like the way we would do a challenge night or whatever. And obviously it goes to the judging session. And in this occasion, I sent out to get a neutral judge to come in and have a look at the images and see what he would have to say about it, just as we would if it was a normal meeting and we were all together. So it got sent out, and we got our super judge in to judge it, and this is what our judge has to say. Well, Barney, it's great to see you here, and thank you very much for coming along to help in the judging of this challenge that we put out to people, and it is really wonderful to have you.
Oh, thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me, and it's a labor of love.
Thank you.
Okay. Just let me say at the start, the criteria I've used in having a look at them. First of all, the pictorial quality. Is the picture interesting to look at? Then there's a technical quality, and your pupils should certainly be up to scratch on those by now. They've been hearing so much over the last few weeks. And finally, and most important of all, was the team, the new normal, the relevance their photographs had to that team. So, with that, off we go, and let's start with the first one. Right, A. Fewer cars, less pollution. I better tomorrow. The idea behind it was quite good, but something just was missed by the photographer, and that is that the writing A Better Tomorrow, next to that out on the road is a van. And I think that to have waited another split second and that would have disappeared. By the way, I have marked these rather harshly for the very reason that there was not a relevance to the team. But this one, I have marked it down to a 4. Now, what do you think? What would you give? On the second, the social distancing. Now, be quite honest with you, what is the oh, bloody hell. What is the subject, the main subject in this photograph? It's meant to be social distancing, but as it stands, the bank takes over the picture. The social distancing only appears just once in the couple on the right and the man in the dead center of the photograph under AIB. What goes on around the entrance to the bank, we don't know. It appears to be jumbled, and it is rather cluttered. We don't see much social distancing. So now, what do you think of the photograph after that? C, mobile man. Now, mobile men and women, and mobile anybody, has been going on as long as mobile phones have been around. This could have been any day, any time, and it in my book does not fully latch on to the theme of the new normal. this is more like the normal. So what do you think on this one? The new normal focus. With this one, for me, what is it all about? What's the flower pot? The shoes? The shopping bag? This, to me, I just do not get it. New normal is just the idea doesn't appear to have any relevance. And for me, I've marked it down to a 3. Now, what do you think? Somebody latched in with a perfect answer to the team. Certainly, this is a new normal. Having the hair done out in the garden, which would have been unthought of just a month ago. It's unfortunate that it has been underexposed, and for somebody who has such a good idea for the team, it's extraordinary that the use of levels wasn't brought into play before the photograph was submitted. Using the levels to bring up the lighting in it would have really made a first-class photograph out of it. You can still do it, of course. So what do you think? In a way, this was one of the better ones. But it needed to distinguish better in the queue, showing the social distance. As it looks there, it does not really look as if there is distance between the pairings. The photograph would possibly have much better taken a little towards the building on the right, up nearer to where those people are sitting on the green, and I would also make a big difference in as much as that building, I would put it up towards the top corner, right, and that person on the queue on the left bring down, with the result you would have a dynamic angle, a 45-degree angle in there, which will really set it off more. So just a photograph that needs a dramatic angle. What do you think? G, Lone Ranger. I'm afraid this one, I ask, what is it? The flowers are seem to be looking over into the table where this something is. I don't know what it is. it says a Lone Ranger. I cannot see the point of this photograph, and I'm afraid it's down at number 1. And 1 point because you entered. 0 emissions. Here's, as far as I'm concerned, 2 photos in 1, even though the second smaller did fit in. Now the funny thing about this is that the electric car changing point, well, that's new. And please, sorry, that's not new. It is part of the normal, and not new. And the little photograph at the back showing the chimney puffing away could hardly be a credit to 0 emissions. However, for this one, I've given it 3 points. What do you think? Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. One-way system, Botanic Gardens. I looked around and looked around, and I says, what am I looking at with a one-way system? There's no indication here. And then I spied over in the middle left what might be an arrow. I am not sure. It just looks like a whitewashed sign in the middle of the path, and it might be an arrow. But to interpret it as a one-way system, well, I think is a bit far-fetched. So I'm afraid down to 1 point. What do you think, Pierre?
Yeah.
K, my new normal. You know, they say that less is more. And as far as I'm concerned, we could do with a lot less here. It's conflicting, and it's got levels of brightness due to the television screens. It's a conflicting array of items, all at different brightness. And the items are normal, not hardly you would call new normal. And I have marked that one down to a 2. What do you think? L, read before entering. At face value, I was unable to read, but they look like virus warning signs and keep out. I would have made that one a horizontal. That post, that large post in the left middle of the photograph, and under the gate, a lot nearer, and cutting off some of that sky as well, would have made that into a nice horizontal. But as against that, the content of the photograph and the way it's shut in your face doesn't make for great viewing. And I've marked that down to a 2. What do you think? Finally, M, shopping. What is the relevance to the new normal here? It's shopping. It's the same as it was last Christmas and last summer. And as well as that, of course, there is the technical aspect of it being underexposed. So here again, down I go because the colours, even though they're out of kilter somewhat, it is colourful, and I've given that a 2. Now, what do you think?
Thank you, Barney. That was very informative. It's very interesting with different people who have different views about different photographs.
Yeah.
I think you have given all the people who were looking in a completely different perspective on what they were taught, what we were looking for. The idea of a theme can be quite challenging because you have to get the theme and you have to get the photographic quality. And I think it's a good exercise in putting your creativity into existence.
Yeah. In the last meeting before we broke up, what do we call her? Marie said that in the next season that we're going to introduce the themed photograph for the monthly competitions.
Yeah, so I think the way going forward that as long as we're in lockdown, those sort of competitions will be now happening like this online. So it's until we can get back out and to be able to meet. And I say I'm very pleased with the people being able to get used to the new system and to be able to get the images in, and especially the system that we've done this set of photographs on, where it's been going in through our website and being uploaded on Google Chrome. I think that's a great way of going forward. And I can only see people improving. It's great to get comments to see what's in it, because it keeps on pushing us on, and when we look at it we say yes, 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 I can see exactly where he's coming from. And of course then different judges have different views, so this way we are giving you, the public, the chance to go and give a different view to what these scores were. Now I noticed Barney gave marks on some and not on others, but we will know his score on them all, because Barney we'll have his score coming in on our score sheet as well, and we will compare his score on these ones compared to yours. Now you will know by them that you can agree or you can disagree. Or you can do whatever, it's up to yourself. It's a great way of you having a choice and an input into it. If it's one of your own images and you are going to give the results and you want to give votes for other people or scores for other people, you give yourself 0. Right, it's one of the scores, because you have to give a score once you enter into the scoring system. You have to give everybody a score, or it won't let you submit it at the end. So when you come to your own, you give it 0. So Barney, thank you very much for coming along. Is there any final words you'd like to say? Words of enthusiasm?
No, I don't know if I mentioned it at the start or not, but you did not tell me in advance that whose pictures were who, and so at this moment I know I'm in the firing line with all the different people, but at least my uh, my my um, my heart is free that I did not do the dirty on
I know you won't.
particularly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose if we leave our society become too dumbed down and always say everything is good, we don't actually ever progress. I don't think any of these are meant as criticisms. They are only meant to help people, to encourage them to produce a better image. And I find if you go to judge it yourself and you're judging other people's, right, you might start to think along these lines yourself. And when you're putting your next photograph into a competition or an exhibition, you will realize how important it is to check around the sides of the photograph to make sure that there's nothing that shouldn't be in them, that the levels are right, the exposure is right, the content is right. And remember, every judge is going to view it in a different way. The important thing is for you to learn from it yourself and come up with your own views as to whether you like the photograph or not. And I think that all the comments that you made were fair comments, and we could make, or other people will come along and will make other comments, and it's a learning curve that everybody is going through. And I thank you most sincerely on behalf of the group for coming along and doing this for us. And hopefully we will see you again at another one of these judging sessions, if not giving a tutorial all of your own.
As long as you will get requests, don't let that fella back in again.
Okay, then, right, Barney. Take care. Thank you very much for your time and trouble, and we'll see you again in the next one. Take care. Thank you. Okay. Bye now. Thanks.
Bye, Peter. Bye-bye.
Okay, folks, you weren't expecting that, were you? But it's great to get a judge to come in and give a different view. And we're getting questions in here on the live stream about how you go about giving your score for it. Barney has given us his score on some of them to give us an idea where he is. You can go and have a look at them yourselves and think and give a score. I'm going to explain to you now what is involved in achieving that. Okay. Listening to you on the phone. Oh yes, it must be on the phone. Yeah. Okay. You go to our website, right, which is the Anoiga Photographic Group's website. There are links all over the place of how to get to it. Most of you have been here because you obviously put in your images from here. And at present, the domain name has got a very strange name on it because that's the way we're operating. Eventually, we will have that more organized and it won't be as difficult as that. You can also get it through the Anoiga website as well. Quite difficult to find it on the Anoiga website. You have to go into the photographic section and there's a small little line that links to it. It's quite difficult to see. It's above one of the photographs. We'll improve on that in the future. But in any case, when you get to our website, you have Enter Score Forms, which is a new button that I've put up here, or a new little sub-menu that I put here up on the top of the website. And you click on it. The other one is now gone for entering. This is the one that is there at present. It's been there since this morning. So you go in there first, and this will bring you into this page. And it will give you the details. The results are to be in by Sunday. And then after that, then we will know what the results have been. There's an Enter Score little button here that will fall in, and you just tip on it and you go into the form, which is a very similar form to what we had for entering the photograph, except this time it gives each one of the photographs and it gives you a score from 1 to 10 for most people. The 0 is used for if it's your image, you put a 0 on it, because I don't think it'd be fair to ask you to score your own. You can in your head, but for us and for this system, it wouldn't be fair on us to ask him. So you put in 0 if it's your own image, or if you say, well, whatever, 0 is there for that reason, and from 1 to 10. 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. You can tick any one of these that you want. Now, as you are going through from image to image, you pull down the slide along here, and it will go through from 1 to you have to give a score on every one. If you don't give a score on every one, it comes to the end, it won't allow you to submit it. At the end, you put in your name and your email and submit, and it will come into our system, and we will then be able to average out the scores and see which one is the photograph that's going to go up onto our Instagram account and onto our website for the photograph from this particular occasion. So that's what we have in store for you, and hopefully I've explained it well enough that you all know what is involved, and we look forward to the scores coming in. It's been a very interesting exercise, and it's the way that we are going to go forward. I don't think we can go back at this stage. Next week, when we have our last live stream in this series, on next Tuesday at 11 o'clock, I will tell you vaguely and not in great detail, but the general gist of the results and the way that they came in, and talk about the averages as they have come in, and see which one we're going to put up onto the website and onto Instagram. And also, I have prepared it at this stage, and I'm going to go through all the images, as I often do after a judging session, and I will go through them, and I will take into consideration what the judge has said, and then see how it could be improved. I have most of the work done on it, and there's some of them needs to have exposure changes in them and various little bits and pieces, and some of them are really, really interesting ones. For the technical challenges that are in them, and it could teach you a huge amount about how to overcome different problems when you're taking photographs. And when you're going into competition or in for this type of a level, the goalpost kind of changes, and you have to be using all the settings that are in your camera and all the technical knowledge that you have. It's not just enough to lift the camera and press it. You have all these other things to take into consideration. And next week I will be going through them and explaining from some of the images, not from them all, and I'll be relating that back to the stuff that you have learned. And I hope that you all stay with us for our last live stream, which will be coming next week. And we're going to go now into the triangle of exposure, where we're going to bring together all the information that we've learned over the last couple of weeks and put it in a way that it will make sense for you. Because as you have been going through, you've just been introduced to different areas. And the big difficulty is at the beginning, when you're being introduced to all these areas, I have a tendency to turn around and say, yes, it is like that, but because there's always implications that other aspects are affecting the image by the different ways that you are doing it. So hopefully next week now we will be into the triangle of exposure, which is the ultimate. Hopefully you'll all have eureka moments and understand what it's about. It is, as I keep on saying, it is the fundamentals in which photography operates. It was always there in the old days when we used to be shooting film. It was all touchy-feely, and you could see it, and you set the camera, and you had a light meter. When it all went digital and the nerds got their hands on it, and it all exists inside in the camera, it's got a little bit more complex, but I think you're all getting around to it. So that's that portion. Of the next thing that I want to do is I want to thank the people from Meetup who joined us for this May challenge that we showed out in June. I will hope the committee will continue on with it now into the future and do the same. Can you give the same to a different person? Yes, you can. Yes, Mary, that makes sense. Each one sits on its own. You pretend that you are the judge, and you don't have to give one. It's not like PR where you have to give your first preference, your second preference, and your third preference. No, you can give the score. If you think the image is absolutely magnificent, you can give it a 10. If you don't think it's all that good, you can give it a 3 or a 4 or a 2 or whatever you want to. If it's your own, you give it 0 because it's unfair for you to do it. And then when it all comes back, it appears on a spreadsheet. And on the spreadsheet, we will average out all the results. So depending on the number of entries that come in, we add up all the score, divided by the number of people that are in it, and that will give us the average score that that person got overall. So we know there'll be one result that we have, and the other result then we'll have the result is of the one that received the most images. Yes, give each one a score. If you don't give one a score, it won't let you get out at the back. It won't let you submit it. Obviously, only submit once. The system may let you do it more than once, but it's only once per person. That's the way we have it hopefully set up. So and the other very important point is that when you're going through this and you're putting in your score and whatever, you can always get back to us and say to us, well, it was, it would be a lot easier if we only had to give whether we liked it or disliked it, it is totally changeable. The system is more or less at infinitum able to be changed around and modified. This is just the starting point, and we see how we go from here. So thank you, Mary, for that question. That's a worthwhile question to get. Now let's go, and as I was saying, thank you to all of you who have joined in and have put in an entry. It's great to have it because you also all learn a huge amount from it as well. Okay, so the meetup people, they can join us next week if they want to on 11 o'clock on Tuesday. It will be our next live stream, and it'll be a little bit of a continuation from where we were this week, and then also it will let you see what my comments for what they're worth are on the images that have gone through. Right, so I'll just give you a quick refresh. Top mark is 10, Mary. Top mark from 1 to 10. It goes across the sheet there. You can see from 1 to 10. You can get 10 as your top mark, and there's a little dot underneath, and you just fill in that box. I would like to see only one score come in from each image. I think it might be possible for you to give one image a 1 and a 2 and a 3, but really we only want one image, one score in of it, like you were the judge giving from 1 to 10, but Barney didn't give any 10s. So we will have to do another one of these challenges and put in images of a much higher standard that will more impress these judges. Very hard to keep judges happy. But the all important thing is we learn from what they have to say, and we can interpret their ideas. The aperture influences the amount of the photo that appears to be sharp. This is what we were doing last week. I said to you last week, in the old days it was touchy-feely and all these things were on a camera and you could actually see it. And when you moved from one to the other, it went click, 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 click. And every time you went click, it was called a stop, and it is still called a stop. The aperture is the size of hole that is in the front, and that comes through the front, and then it goes from a very big hole to a very small hole. I just want to read it. Do you only one score, or do you give 0, 10 under each photo? Do we only give one score, or do we go from 0 to 10 under each photo? Right, okay. When you go into the actual form to fill it in, it will make a lot more sense, I hope. And under each image that you've seen in being judged, there's a photograph of that image, and it's called A. And then underneath A, there's a box called A. And if it's your image, you score it 0 because you don't give it any score. If it is somebody else's, you have a look at it and you decide whether you think it's worth 1 or 5 or 10. The whole choice is there. You pick one of those numbers and tick that little box that is underneath it. Then you move on to picture B, which is just underneath it. If it's yours, you put in 0. If it's not yours, it's somebody else's. You score it from 1 to 10 again, giving it either 1 or 10 or 5 or 6, and in the little button underneath it will click in there for you and you will see it. And as you are filling it in, you will see that it will work right. If there are any issues, and there could very well be issues about filling it in, if you put up the question about it on Friends of Anoiga, I will realise that other people are maybe having this same issue. It's not until we actually use it do we know what is involved in it. So yes, one on each image, and it will be much more self-explanatory as you go through the actual images. So just go to it, have a little look and see. If anybody has any problems, they can always get back onto me, and like we do in our small little Skype groups, I will go back to you and I will help you to fill in the form. It's supposed to be secret, I know, but I'll give you a hand in filling it in, and you can press the actual button and get through it. It is actually quite simple, and once you do it once, you'll be wondering, like, how could it be so simple? So let's go back to apertures. Full aperture is when a big hole and a huge amount of light passes through. And then as you go down, less and less and less light can get in through the lens, in through the hole in the front of the lens. This is inside the lens. You don't always see it happening. It happens internally. And obviously the small hole lets much less light in than the big hole. And it also affects the amount of photograph that's in focus. So that's what we are doing. We are mainly working in aperture control. 2.8, as it says, really, and it's a small number. Right? And why are these numbers? Because some mathematician has some way of calculating this, got to do with the amount of area that's involved. And then 4 is smaller, 5.6 is smaller. These are the ones that we know and love. Every time we hop from one of these, of the numbers that I'm showing you, it becomes half the amount of light passes through. So you get half the amount of light going through from f16 is at f22. Now, not all of your cameras go from f2.8 to f22. Some of you have a much smaller range. The bigger the range, the more choice you have in all sorts of different areas. And as we get into the triangle of exposure, this becomes more obvious. Some of you only go from 5.6 to 11, some only from 8 to 4, depending upon your camera. Anyway, aperture, the bigger the hole or the aperture, the more light it can pass through, right? And the next point I made was the smaller the number, the bigger the hole, or the bigger the aperture. That's the bit to get your head around, because the opposite way around of what you're thinking about. And when you get your head around this, it helps to get the triangle of exposure to make sense. The smaller the hole, the bigger the number, the more of the image will be in focus. So that's relating back to depth of field. So with f22, more of the photograph will be in focus from the foreground to the background, and less at 2.8. If you are doing a landscape and you want it from the foreground to the background in focus, 22 is where you want to be, preferably. And if you want to take a photograph of a person in a landscape, you want the person in focus and the background all out of focus, 2.8 is what you're looking for. To do this exercise that you've done, you've had to use aperture control. So you select the aperture and the camera will set the shutter speed automatically for you. You still have control over all the other variables that we've been talking about. A good spot to put for the exercise would have been to put ISO into the automatic position and let the nerd take care of it. But you don't have to. You have control over it. You have control over the focusing point that you use, whether it's manual focusing, spot focusing, or the 32 areas or center weighted focusing, and likewise overexposure. You have control over them as well. You've also got control over exposure compensation. They can both all be very handy for you and good for you, and it can also catch you out at some time. So that's what's going on there. All these issues are going on at the one time. So this was the experiment that I did, and I focused it on the camera. I used spot focusing, and I suggest spot focusing is a good one for doing this exercise, because you know what part of the photograph is actually focused on. When you're doing it on a phone or on a tablet, for those who are trying to do it that way, you don't have control over the aperture as much as you do over your focus point. and you could wherever you put your finger. So in this camera, that's where we put the focus point. Now, some people may have had challenges in this area and wondered how they could actually determine what they were focusing on. If you put it on spot focusing, all right, you look through your camera and you either get an X or one of the lights, only one light flashes where you're focusing, and that's the spot you were focusing on. So go back to what we learned a long time ago. Line up your camera with the focusing spot you want to. Half depress your shutter. Focus lock. Remember that from way back? And that will focus on the front part. And then you recompose your photograph to include what you want. And in these X's, you're trying to get from the foreground to the background. So that's what was setting that was on the camera. And that's what we got. We were focusing on this bit, and we got it in focus. All right. And we look here into the background, and it's pretty okay in the background, right? But look what we have it set at, F8. So F8 is a big number. It's not 22 is even bigger, will be even better. But a big number will give you a large depth of field. It'll go from the foreground into the background, right? I put the chair in at a third of the distance because that's usually the point that you focus on when you are doing something to get from the foreground into the background. But in order to get it to show more and to be more obvious, I put it way here. I focus on this point here, which means a third of the distance in front of that is out of the image here. Right? Whereas there, this chair actually should have come in. This is a better way of showing it to you. And a lot of you are probably saying, "Oh, I can't see the difference," and I can understand why you are saying that. And when you've got the full range and the full implications of what's going on and you know what you're doing, it really does make a difference. So that's F8. So the next one we took was 5.6, and we go through 4. See, starting to fall out of focus here and fall out of focus here, whereas this is still staying, but we're still focused on this spot. I didn't change the focus. 4.5, getting less and not as much focus up here. 3.5, definitely the focus going over toward, even the chair is gone. All right, 2.8, the chair is definitely gone, and this is in focus. So that's what, if that was a person's head or a person that you are photographing, they would be in focus and the background will be out of focus, right? Now I know this is at a side angle and it's the way we did it, but the greater the distance between the foreground and the background, the more obvious this becomes. So that was what that shot was. The aperture controls the amount of light that comes in through the lens. We can also use it to control the amount of the photograph that appears to be sharp or in focus.
No photo on screen.
No photo on screen.
There's no photos now. You mean now?
We are seeing your screen, just you, Peter. Oh, beg. Oh, sorry, that took a long time. Sorry, desktop. Okay, folks, we have. Yes, sorry, I'm only after getting that now. Did you see that happening up there? No. No. Okay. I haven't been checking. Right. So I am now. Okay, Maura. Cannot see photos you're talking about. Okay. Right, I know what has happened. Sorry, Maura. Okay, right then. So, right. Okay. You have actually seen all these photographs that I have been talking about. Okay, you have it now up on screen because I have checked it. That was my fault. I wasn't watching the monitor of what was going out to you. This is the stuff we were talking about, the aperture. I presume you haven't seen any of these images that I'm putting up on the screen as we go now. What's coming in, Mary? No photos on screen. Okay, sorry folks, that was my fault. I'll go back to where I think I lost we're going back through all the images and we will get back to this one, the aperture influences. I presume that's where you have lost the images from. Sorry, that was my fault. I just didn't hit the right button. And I could see it because it was to the front of my screen, but I didn't realize what was going on behind. Okay, this is the aperture that we're talking about. This is what we're talking about, the stops, the aperture going from top to bottom. A big hole, a lot of light getting in, a small hole, less light getting in. The apertures, we were talking about this a few minutes ago, and as it gets smaller, half the amount of light each time passes through. The aperture, I was saying about your camera, that it goes from 2.8 to f22. Not all of your cameras have this. Some of your cameras have more than this. It's more dependent upon the lens that's on your camera than your actual camera. So if you have transferable lenses, you will find that it will be different size lens, will have different amount of apertures. That's why when people are buying lenses, I bought a 1.4 or I bought a whatever, and that's the way it's also specified. So that's some of you only have from 4 to 11. The more you have, as we're saying, the more choice that you have in what you can do. The smaller the number, the bigger the hole. I'm saying that. The smaller the hole, the bigger the number, the more of the image will be in focus, which is a combination of the two up on top. Now we're back to giving you pictures. This was what I was saying about, to do this exercise, you need to do the aperture priority. And what I said still stands. You set the aperture, the camera takes care of working out the exposure, dependent upon what you have all your settings set for. It depends upon what you've got your ISO set for. If it's set for automatic, it will do it automatically. It depends upon what you have your focus set for, where the actual focus is going to be. And as I was explaining to you, the spot focusing is possibly the best one to do with, because it lets you know where you are focusing on. And as you look through your camera, it gives you either a little X like what I was using on my camera, or there's a little green dot, or some way of letting you know what has been focused on. When you half depress your camera, that's the point it focuses on. Then you can recompose your photograph to whatever you want to include. And then I went through these ones. Sorry, I had in this one, the point I was making was that I had focused on that spot and then I had recomposed it. When it was recomposed, you can see obviously that's in focus, right? Because that's what I focused on. The chair is still relatively good because it's at f8, big number. That's the biggest aperture that's on this particular camera. The background, more or less in focus. But as we go 5.6, as you go along, you can see the chair and the focusing start to go here, and it's here, but it's still here. And when you get up to the full aperture on this camera, which is 2.8, you can see that the foreground, this here where it was focused on, is in focus, and the chair is out of focus. That's what you would use if you were photographing a person and you wanted the background out of focus. And then the F, whichever is the biggest number, smallest hole, is a landscape where you want the landscape, you want the foreground and the background in focus. And then we were talking about the depth of field, and I think that's when we discovered that you hadn't seen the images. All right, so that's where that is. Okay, now let's see how ye interpreted that. Okay, and let's see how you got on with the homework. Okay, I put up the file info. Not that I don't believe what you've written. I think it's really great when you write down here, for your own sake as well, what you are focusing on. And this one is f2.8, so that's a big number, a big aperture, a big hole, right? And it's a small number, so you're expecting to not get a huge amount of it in focus. So now Bonnie hasn't said exactly what she's focusing on, so I'm assuming that it might be the chair or it might be the apples. Now, the other very significant point about this depth of field that I haven't brought out, and this photograph very much does, is that it's also dependent upon the lens that you're using, the focal length of your lens. Now this lens is set to 9.2 millimeters. That's the focal length of the lens. You can see it coming over here at 2.8. That is a wide angle lens. And a wide angle lens will always give you considerably better depth of field than a long lens, right? And when you set your camera to a wide aperture, it would be quite difficult for you to see the difference between 2.8 and the lower ones because of the perspective that the wide angle lens gives, right? This is much more effective if you've got a long lens, like if you're using it at the zoom at its maximum. This type of an effect will show up even more. But and that's why it's quite difficult in this photograph to see. It all looks relatively sharp, and it looks relatively sharp because you've discovered that at f2.8, using your camera set as a wide angle, you don't have to worry too much about depth of field. It nearly takes care of itself. Right? Whereas if you had it more zoomed, no, it's doing the reverse. So depending upon which you want to achieve. So it depends upon which one of these points that this photograph is focused on. If it had been focused there and it was a longer lens, as in maybe a 150 or 200 millimeter zoom lens at its full extension or whatever you would have, you'll be seeing the difference. You really need a huge difference between the foreground and the background for this type of an exercise to work. But I'm not criticizing it. I'm not saying a word about it. I'm just pointing out to you for when we get into the triangle of exposure where this is going to make an issue. The fact that it didn't quite do what we want to is good, because now we are explaining what happens under those circumstances, which is a result in itself. This is at 3.5. I don't know which point, but you can see it's quite difficult to see the difference in it. F5, you can hardly see any difference in any of these photographs. Now, obviously, that is coming a lot sharper than what the previous one is, what you would expect, right? But it is still, the first one was very good, right? Was still very, very good there. That's because of the wide angle. But obviously, as you get up into f6 and f8, even better. Oh no, sorry, f8 is the smallest aperture she has on her camera, and that is, you can see how much sharper. You can see the lines are even coming in sharp. So there you have belt and braces. You've got the wide angle lens giving you great depth of field. You have f8 giving you the great depth of field, and you had it down to 160 per second, which is easy to handhold. You may have done this on a tripod for the sake of the experiments, but if you could see further into the background, into the you could see how further distances were working. But that was quite interesting. This was done by Declan, and he did it on his phone. And I downsized this image, Declan. Your image came in at full size. Declan is wondering at what size his images are being transferred from his phone. And he told me in it that he had focused on the bottle. Did this with his phone. Now, if you went to get a depth of field type effect with the phone from the foreground into the background, that would have been better shot horizontally, because you have a longer distance from front to back. You only have from there to there and front to back. And this is the way you achieve depth of field on a phone or a tablet, right? Because you tip with your finger, as it has here on the phone, right? Now he has been able to change the aperture because he's got an all singing, all dancing phone, and he shot that at f2, which means it should be a shallowish depth of field, right? The next one he's done it at f4, so there should be more here from here into the background. Background isn't quite in here yet, but it's on its way in. And then the next one he's given us at f16. See how it's come in there. Look how it's coming in the foreground. And he's achieved it by doing it there. He's done this on his phone. So Declan has an all singing, all dancing phone. And on our little Skype group the other day, he hasn't got his all singing, all dancing camera, and he's doing it all on his phone. And he says it can all be done on the phone. It does take a little bit more poking around. Pebble Dash is a great thing to see detail on for this sort of thing. So I say in horizontal. So if you want to create a photograph on a phone or on a tablet, and you want to have the foreground in focus and the background out of focus, ask Dennis. He has it sussed. Now these ones were put in by Gary, and Gary has X'd the spot where he had focused on, right? And that's great because it helps. He's shot them horizontal. Now the only thing that I would say would be if we could have had the photograph with something much further into the background, kind of heading towards infinity, right? It would suit this sort of an exercise much better. So we shot that at f4.2. He's told us what ISO, because poor Gary just learned the really hard way in the last lot of homework that he gave in. that the ISO was wrong. And as I say, sense bought is far better than sense taught, and we've also learned from it as well. And now he's becoming very, very much aware of it. 1/500 of a second is what he has used, and he's gone through them all, and he's done likewise F5. And the only way I can work on these ones to see if the idea is working is look over here in the background. 4.2 is not that big wide open aperture. You can get much smaller. I'm surprised Gary's camera hasn't got something smaller than that. You can see there it's not that much in focus, and as you are coming along through them, you will see as his F8 is getting much more sharper over there. All right, and 800, he was unsure here. There was a question mark. And then this last one was LF13, which you would expect to have detail way over there, right? Is there another one? Oh, F29. Oh God, that camera is really good at that end of the range, isn't it, Gary? It really is very, very good at that age, right? And then ISO at 1/6 of it. Oh, he probably tried to use one. I don't know what that would. That be 1/6 of a second or 600 of a second, or is there a misprint there? Why is, oh, it must be a 1/6 of a second. F29 400 ISO. Is it that he tried to do it at a 1/6 of a second and got blur, which you would expect because maybe he hasn't got it on a tripod? Is that your last one? It is. I'll go back to this one because I want to say something else about this set of photographs as a set of test photographs. If we had been lucky enough to have had the bank in the foreground in the photograph, when we got to this last one here, F29, we would have really proven the point that the foreground was in focus. It's actually very difficult to see it in the water here, whereas if there was a stone or a chair or something sitting, or a block or a brick or something sitting in there, and then it would also show that this point where it's focused on is a third of the distance in the actual photograph, the hyperfocal distance, and that would show up in it. But this exercise was to do with understanding aperture priority and getting all your aperture, and that it has. I'm bringing these points forward because when we go into the triangle of exposure, that would be what we would be trying to achieve. This was one that Gary that Declan sent in. It's just out of sequence because the way the numbering went on it, and he was just experimenting with focusing on the cap lock. These ones were put in by Irene, and Irene 1-2. Now this is 2.8. It's yes, 2.8. We know it here by the information that it's 2.8. It's a wide angle look. It's 9.2 on the camera.
The camera fixed the time and it's handheld.
Oh, the camera picked the time. Oh, the camera picked the time, and it was, yes, you can see it was handheld because of the blur. You can see that because it was a 1/6 of a second. Yes, it is very interesting when you're doing these things to try something else, because a photograph that doesn't turn out right is what we're expecting. It is a great learning curve, especially if we can figure out what it was. Oh, Irene, I take back what I said. I never saw the 2.8 here. It's the same color as the tile. You can change the color of the type in the photograph. In Photoshop, relatively easy. I didn't see it. I beg for forgiveness, right? Now, as I was saying, she's using a wide angle. She was using, and that gives you boot and braces in order to get a very good depth of field. It's 2.8. So I don't know what you focused on, right? But that bag of stuff there is not in focus. So it must be, it's 2.8, which makes sense. And the background isn't in focus. So it's not on the background you focus. So let's assume you either focus on this boat, on here or here. And that's what the idea was. So you're looking for your depth of field from here to here. And the furthest bit away is this tree over here. This is great here for detail, to be able to see if there's texture in it or not. So yes, you got that idea. And the next one is 3.5. Not a huge amount of difference in it, but you can see that this here is starting to come into focus, as you would expect. 4.5. Oh, what happened there? That is correctly exposed, right? It's 1/500 a second at 3.5 at 125th. Now, what happened in this one? Why did the exposure go all over the place? 100, yeah, you've ran out of rope. Right, your camera wasn't able to, there was too much, 125th of a second at 4.5. So what has happened there? Why has that not, you've had it on aperture priority. Somebody's there listening and it's worked out what has happened. 4.5 is the aperture and it said 125. You're using aperture and it's not giving you surely your camera gives you a faster shutter speed than 125th of a second if you were set an aperture. Patricia here from the start. Good morning, Patricia. Good, great to see you. And so there's something strange there. It's got something to do with the settings. So when we get to our little Skype group on Friday, we'll have a little talk about it because there's something to be learned here. All right, there's something to be learned. Some little setting somewhere went astray here. And this one is 100th of a second at 5.6 and it is 6.3. There's a huge, you have gone to a lot of trouble. Yeah, that was 11:48, so that's okay. That has been sorted, right? But Bonnie's one has been sorted. Yeah, okay. We're back to pictures. So what Irene has done is that she has written down all the settings that the camera gave her, and that's because the nerd gave you all those options just because he could. Right, the ones that I gave you, the 2.8, 4, 5.6, 11, they are full stops. They're the big moves, right? And they're the ones we used to know and love. But because our camera is so sophisticated, it allows us to use all these ones in between. No problem putting them in. They are all there. In actual fact, in the old days, we used to use third of a stop. So we would click our camera, we would click it, and then we'd bring it back a third or two thirds forward, right? But the nerd now has put it in as an actual figure in there. That's very interesting. But why your exposure changed, I don't know. This one is by Maura, and she has put A for, I don't know if that's for aperture priority, or is it that she has spot focused on that part of the door? All right. She is using f8. She's using her camera again at full, at focal length of 4.3 millimeters, which is a full wide angle, I presume, of the camera. I'm presuming that. When you look at your camera, you can know if I'm right or wrong. It's using a 1/6 of a second, which is hand holdable. It's f8, so it's doing exactly what you're expecting. It's giving you from foreground to background in focus, probably focusing on the car to get the hyperfocal distance from one to the other, getting the idea of what's going on. This is 5.6. This should have less. Now this time we can go back and see here. All right. So that should be less. 2.8 should even be less. So all the, oh yes, look at how the doorknob has gone out of focus because she's obviously focusing on the car or the mirror or something here. That's what you expect it to be, a shallower depth of field. F4 is working within the different parameters as to where it's going in and out. And this is Mary Mac. And Mary Mac has put these in
on the car.
On the car, yes, as I taught on the car. Yes, you've got the idea and you can see the way the exposures come in and out. And you're getting to understand the car is the hyperfocal distance at which you are focusing, right? We used to use these terms in the past before we all went digital. And you can really impress your friends. What did you learn from lockdown? Oh, I learned a hyperfocal distance. I'd be really impressed with you. Anyway, with us all, Mary put this in and it's slightly out of sequence. It's at the end of her shots. And, oh no, sorry, it comes later. Sorry, Mary, sorry. The photographs that come later on. She did this at 2.8 and I don't know what she's focusing on. Presumably it's on the chappy or somewhere in it. So obviously it's on this because this is in focus and the background is starting to fall out of focus in the flower pots at the back, right, which is what we're trying to achieve. Now what Mary went and did in this shot was she came and she didn't like the exposure in the previous one. She said, I don't like that exposure. So what did she do? She was listening And she went in and she used the exposure compensation. She minused it by a third. She let the third of a stop come in less to make it go darker because she didn't like it in the previous one. Well seen. Also very impressed when you put this in, because it's a great record for yourself. Shutter speed. She was playing and experimenting there with different bits and pieces, and that's very important. And when you write it down yourself on the image, it is a great help to you, because then when you look back you can see what is going on for your own use and benefit. F5, 100 ISO, and the shutter speed was 100 of a second. Now we were aperture priority, so she set that. She set her ISO, and the little nerd worked out the shutter speed for her. Right inside, because you had shutter priority. If you were doing a totally manual, you would have to set that yourself, and there are ways of doing that. I'm not really talking about manual, but just saying it at this stage. So F5, you know, it shouldn't be that depth of a field, but there's not a huge difference between the front and the back. And yet again, Mary is using her camera with a fairly wide angle lens on it, and wide angle will automatically give you a great depth of field, which is a perfect lens for using for landscapes, to get your depth of field from the foreground into the background and getting a whole lot of stuff in. So yes, Mary has been working around here. And these ones are in from Susan. Yes, Susan, very impressed. Susan has focused on, with spot focusing, on the chair, on the towel. The towel was an excellent choice, because look at the great detail into it. You can see it. Or a rug, Mary says. Okay, rug. And this shed here in the background is very good as well, because you can there's texture in that to see if it's in focus or not. If you could get a JCB and move that a good bit down the road, it would be better for our exposure, because we could see if it was in focus there or not. But anyway, you worked within a very small area. Look what you used your camera at fairly wide angle as well, but you can see the effect of it knocking out the foreground out of focus, right? And it's at 2.8. That is exactly what you're expecting. You've really got the idea of what we're talking about. This one is F4. You see the way it's starting to become much sharper here? This is starting to become more sharper. The point you focus on, hyperfocal distance, is 1/3 of the distance in, so it's 1/3 in front and 2/3 behind. And at 2.8, it's out. F4, it's starting to come in, and I think you've put one in there at F8. Look, it's coming in even better, and so is the background. Okay. Oh, that's the last one. I have to give you top marks for that. That was well done. I think you have all learned a huge amount from what we have been talking about over the last couple of days. I will go back through this again for putting in the results from the challenge. Go to our website. You know, everybody knows now how to get to it. Go into this new button that I put up here, or a new menu called Enter Score Form. Don't know what to call this. Maybe somebody might give me a better name. You go in there, you click on that. When you click on that, this is the screen that comes up. You go into the Enter. You give us from 1 to 10. You give a score. Must be completed by the 10th. The image with the highest score will be appearing on our website. And then when you've that done and that Enter button, this is what you're going to get. And there's going to be A is going to come up here on the top, the letter A. Enter your score here. If you are the owner of that photograph, you go into that little button and you left click on it, and it goes 0, because you're telling us that's your image. You don't want to vote on it. Okay. And then you decide whether it's worth 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, it's a really good one. That's worth 10. You left click there and it will give it to you there. You do that, you just click one of them for each one.
Go down to the next one.
I can't go down to the next one. Mary would like me to go down to the next one. I can't go down to the next one on the screen, because this is a screen grab. And I took it this morning before I did this live stream, so that I would have it, because I didn't really want to go online while I was on the stream and show it to you there, because the Wi-Fi might give out on me and give me challenges in the stream, running too much stuff. So I did it here. But as as you pull this little bar down here, the next image will come, the next one, all the way down to the bottom. You get down to the bottom, it will ask you your name, it will ask you your email, you'll enter both, and then there'll be a submit button, and you hit the submit button, and then it will pop up back to the top. Oh, it doesn't, it goes up to the to the very, very top of this screen after a while, and it says, it will tell you that your results have been noted, as it did when you put in your downloaded image as well. It did exactly the same. Right then, folks. Plenty of rain here. It's just teeming here as well. So, you know, the farmers here need it as well. So not only Ireland getting it. Where are we? We are here. Okay. Now you can have a look at me. This is where I left the system too long. So I thank you all very much for your time and patience. Very impressed that you all put stuff into the competition. It has given us a great learning curve as to how to improve our images, how to interpret them. We have been doing a lot of the technicalities that has been involved. So I look forward to the last live stream, because that's the one that's going to make all the difference. It's going to be the finalizing of the triangle of exposure. And because the Kigera was in today, and Barney, we will call Barney the Kigera, he has decided in his wisdom that there's no homework for anybody tonight. So you're getting your first free night of no homework between this and the next live stream. So we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday at 11 o'clock, and we will have the triangle of exposure. So thank you all for being with us, and we look forward to the next one. Adios, slán, and we see you in the next one.